Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HR Tech Edge podcast, where we dive into the latest trends and insights in HR technology. I'm your host, Sudesh, and today we're honored to have Orla Daly, Chief Information Officer at Skillsoft, with us. Orla will be sharing her expertise on how Skillsoft is leveraging technology to enhance learning and development in organizations worldwide. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hey, Orla, how are you doing?
Good thing. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure having you on our podcast. So before we dive into everything related to technology, talent retention, etc., I'd love you to dive into your journey, your career path. Tell us something about yourselves, your 2 decades of experience.
I'm sure. So I've been fortunate to, I would say, have had a good career in tech that's crossed the globe. So I started my career in the UK and had the opportunity to work in France and Belgium before moving to the US. I've generally always been in, I would say, business facing roles within IT and a part of a number of large transformation programs, which I think really are the best experience to really learn new skills and really understand the impact that technology can bring to bear across a company. So that has always motivated me, and I think also given me a lot of visibility into just the importance of having the right team and the right skills in order to achieve your business outcomes. And then most recently, I joined, I guess 2 years ago now, I've joined Skillsoft as the CIO, which was just a nice opportunity to work with a company whose job it is to help organizations upskill and reskill, which is obviously something near and dear.
Okay. Looks like you've actually traveled a lot in your decades of experience. Totally justifies the world map behind you, I guess.
Yes, I would like to travel a little bit more, but yes, it's nice to have it behind.
Absolutely. Talking about talent retention, it's stated that talent retention is a challenge for 27% of respondents. So, what do you think are measures that can be taken to improve talent retention in the tech industry, particularly in light of ongoing skill gaps?
Yeah, so I think, talent retention in tech has probably been, a long time challenge. But you're right in that the Skillsoft C-suite perspective report this year did highlight that it was, a challenge primarily for a number of executives, and 27%, I think, as you mentioned, was the number that came out. And as we think about that, from my perspective, I guess, and what I've seen, it's really about three things. One, I think people want a purpose, and they want to understand how their role really ties to the business outcomes and the business success. And they want to be able to believe in what the company is looking to achieve. Secondly, I think the report, really highlighted just the importance of opportunity, and especially in tech, which is rapidly evolving. More and more we see, irrespective of the surveys that you look at, just the importance that people are putting on the ability to continue to learn and grow and develop. We saw it in our IT skills and salary report, which we also published earlier this year, where 43% of respondents said that they would change employers due to a lack of growth or development opportunities. And I think that's also backed up with another report from PwC, where employees are nearly twice as likely to consider new opportunities if it gives them new skills. So skilling is definitely a big theme that's resonating across the industry. And then I would say, thirdly, it's about having a healthy work environment. And we see that also in a lot of the feedback that we get, that in addition to having an ability to learn and grow, work-life balance, benefits, etc., are still top of mind. And we also saw in our report where people are still trying to figure out just hybrid versus work from home versus work in the office, and what the right combination there is. And that's, I think, just backed up also by a number of other reports in the industry.
Perfect. Some amazing points covered out there. Now, talking about the same report, I guess 70% of tech executives report skill gaps, and 62% believe these gaps will persist over the next 2 years. So, what factors do you think contribute most to these ongoing skill gaps?
So, I think, right, it's a very large number to see that nearly 3/4 of the industry is struggling with this. And I would say that as I think about it, there's a few factors. One is just the rate of technology change. It is a major factor. And companies are just scrambling to keep up with emerging technologies, Gen AI being the latest example, obviously, but being able to adapt and even get resources that have knowledge about newer technologies is certainly challenging and very competitive. But we still also see continued challenges with availability for skills like cybersecurity and from skills in the data field, in addition to AI. And then I would say, some of what else I experienced would be just that discipline around ongoing skill development. I think about skill development, it's a little bit like going to the gym. You have to keep it up. And if you stop, then you start to fall behind and it's hard to start over again because you have a bigger gap to solve. And I think our C-suite report also highlighted this a little bit, where 93% of the tech executives that responded said they have access to authorized training, but a third said that they did not believe they were investing enough money in training, and 32% felt that their existing programs were ineffective because of that challenge to just keep pace and keep up with the change that's happening in the industry.
Perfect. Well, I personally believe as well that skill gaps is something that is persisting in current scenarios, right? And I really like the analogy of the gym perspective of it. So I mean, it was great that you actually brought it up. Continuing about the report, the report also mentions that 44% of tech executives struggle to hire talent with the right skills, right? What do you believe are the most in-demand skills that are currently difficult to find, and why would you say
so? Clearly, AI comes to the top of the pile now, and specifically, I guess, some of the technical skills to enable some of the AI capabilities. But we also see that cybersecurity continues to be up there in terms of the top gap, as well as I mentioned, some of the skills around data and data science, and not to forget cloud computing. So while AI has maybe got a lot of attention and media attention, I think as you look across industries and companies, they are still struggling with some of the same gaps that we had a few years ago in the areas of security and data, and even to some extent cloud computing. And obviously, as we think about AI, data is a key enabler there. So I think that just doubles down on the challenges maybe in that space that need to be solved in order for us to ultimately take full advantage of AI. According to a Deloitte report recently, it claimed that there is 22,000 AI specialists worldwide, which obviously is a very small number when you think about just the impact and the scope of what people are trying to do around AI. And then I think we continue to see challenges with getting people interested in cybersecurity, just based on maybe the job stress around that, which kind of ties back to how do we solve for some of the challenges and about having that healthy balance. So I think there's a lot that kind of factors into some of these skills that are in higher demand, and how do you really upskill in those areas, but also then how do you maintain your team members once you have those skills within your company.
Perfect. Now, key challenge we spoke about, and I firmly believe that this is a key challenge. A lot of respondents, about 31% of the respondents, cited budget constraints being a key challenge. How do you think budget limitations impact the ability to address skill gaps? And what strategies can organizations implement to overcome this challenge?
So budget constraints are certainly still quite real. And even where there is budget, right, it's always a bit about how can I get the best return for the investments that I make. And therefore, in its base case, it can have a limit on, it can impact the number of employees that you're able to train, or just the level of training, I guess, that you can offer based on what budgets you have available. But I do think that, there are ways around that. And as I think about just the full budget that you have available to you, often, we engage with consultants, or we have other spend that if you thought about just if you could ratchet that back a little bit to invest it in training programs, I think you'd see the return manyfold. So I think it's one, getting a little bit clever about the spend we have and what are some of the levers and savings we can make in one space to really invest in learning and upskilling your team, because that will pay back manyfold over time. And then also I would say it doesn't always have to be a cash impact. We've had some good success at Skillsoft also with peer-to-peer knowledge sharing and peer-to-peer skill training, and leveraging those that have knowledge within your organization and having them help upskill. other team members. So I think that's another way to kind of overcome the challenge. But I guess, if you think about it holistically, it really does start with understanding, well, what are the business outcomes you're trying to drive, really assessing what skills that you have in place, and then where you have those gaps, what are the different avenues to solve for those, which certainly can be about engaging in learning programs internally and with external partners, but also then thinking about how you leverage the talent you have to share the knowledge across the team.
Perfect. Those are some important points covered out there. Now, talking about the age old concept of grooming talent when they are at the right age, what role can partnerships with educational institutions and training providers play in addressing the skill gaps in the tech industry?
So I think, with any area that is not your core competency, I'm a firm believer it's always helpful to have a partner or to have somebody that you can go to that's going to bring an external perspective or perhaps some new tools or guidance in terms of supporting you on that journey. And I would say learning and development is no different. Therefore, it is important to, like anything, select the right partners. And that could be educational institutes, it could be training providers who, will help, I guess, will spend the time to understand the challenge that you have and what you're trying to achieve with your training programs, and then help you craft something that really allows you to assess where your talent are at versus where you want them to be, and then building out those programs and measuring the returns of the investments that you make. We've certainly, obviously, we partner with a lot of organizations, but also as we think about Skillsoft, we also have a number of philanthropic engagements where we partner with other companies, like even the Special Olympics, and co-developed training with them, for example, around leadership with neurodiversity. And that's something that we've been able to also then consume. I think there's a lot of opportunity as we think about learning and think about it in a broader context, to tap into formal, informal avenues to get those materials, and then working with training providers to really help where necessary, and especially where it's specialized skills training that can bring that outside in view and just help you put a program around training, because it's no different to anything else. And we talked about the budget constraints. You do want to make sure that you're investing wisely and that you're getting the expected return, which I think is something certainly at Skillsoft we focus a lot on when we engage with our customers.
Fair enough, Paula. I also believe that honing talent at the right time and making sure that you pave the way for development for those kind of talents. So bringing in the right programs and bringing in the right skill sets and identifying those skill sets at an early stage or at a stage where you feel that they could actually do much better. So yeah, I totally agree with that as well.
For a point, maybe if I could, there is, it's about, obviously with tech we talk a lot about the technical skills, but it is also about what we call the power skills, which is the softer side of maybe your skills, as well as emotional intelligence, the ability to communicate. And what we're seeing more and more is just agility and resilience within team members, because what's relevant today from a skill perspective probably won't be relevant 5 years from now, or at least a good portion of it won't be, just based on the pace of change. So I think equally focusing your learning on not just the skill that's needed today, but giving your team members, the platform to continue to learn and grow, and really build in that resilience, that curiosity, that agility is really critical now as we think about learning programs.
Perfect. I mean, I believe in the same virtue, and thanks a lot for highlighting that. I believe that these are skills definitely important, but are understated in current scenarios. Do you also believe that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you spoke about Gen AI solutions, and AI is kind of the latest buzzword, right? So what do you believe are some best practices for integrating AI and Gen AI solutions into the workforce to complement human skills and address existing gaps?
So I think, you hit it in terms of it's really about how do you complement the human skills and address gaps in that capacity right now. AI is very much in its infancy. I think we all see that there is huge potential when it is leveraged responsibly, ethically, and we really think about where it can bring benefits. So I think first off, it's just, and this is what we've seen many companies do, it's about giving a level of base understanding to all team members in terms of what is AI, what is Gen AI, what are the potential use cases that it can be applied to, And then it's putting in part, I think, the right guardrails in terms of how people can use it and leverage it, as well as creating frameworks where people can bring forward ideas in terms of where they think AI can make a difference in business and where it can help achieve business outcomes or just drive efficiencies. And then having a team that can ultimately help deploy some of those changes. And that's certainly been a formula that we've been working on, whether it's through hackathons or other means to just gather ideas and then really put teams of folks that have the right skill set on those ideas so that we can then generate some returns, often then spawns more ideas and then helps to kind of push it out into the organization. But I think there's a big focus on just how do you apply it and giving people an opportunity to really try it and test it, as opposed to just understanding the theory of the potential of AI.
I guess that's a step in the right direction if I were to sum that up, right?
Yes, I think, and the key thing is just getting started, right? It's like with everything that's new, you have to dip your toe in the water and just start to get familiar, and there will be some failures along the way, and that's all part of the learning curve. But I think the main thing is for folks to just get started, I would say, and try, because certainly there's no other guarantee that you will be left behind than if you just stand on the sideline and wait. So I think it's really about just getting in the game.
Feel faster, learn faster. That's how it is. So, in light of findings from this report, just to sum it up, what immediate steps can executives take to mitigate the impact of skills gaps on their organizations?
So I would say it really starts with understanding what your organization needs. So as you think about your business objectives and how you're going to deliver on those, what are the skills that are ultimately needed to make you successful? And then it's about understanding where your organization is at relative to those skills and really measuring, benchmarking your talent and then developing a roadmap to get them from where they are to where they need to be. And obviously there's many methods to do that, whether that is through formal learning programs, whether that's peer-to-peer knowledge shares, whether it's coaching, whether it's community groups that are stood up, etc. But I think it's really start with understanding what you need, understanding what you have, and then defining that program to advance you. And all along the way, you have to have that constant checking and measuring to say, are you making progress? Are you, heading in the right direction, or do you need to pivot? And I think just making the team part of defining that program is also super important. We don't always know, what people's maybe skills are that they don't leverage on a day-to-day basis or what their aspirations are. So I think having the employee be an active part of that dialogue is super important to just create that motivation, as well as to give folks an opportunity to see a path within the organization to continue to grow and to develop.
Having been a part of hackathons myself, I've never been a great coder in my life, but I've actually been a part of a few hackathons. One thing I believe, having seen the other side of things from an employee perspective of someone who's ready to be hired from a hackathon perspective, I think setting up the expectations in terms of what exactly the requirements are is something I believe is lacking in that case. Do you firmly believe that as well?
No, I agree. So when we've casted very wide to say, find a use case that uses AI and come up with it, people do tend to struggle. There's some that can do that well, but it is a very small population. So what we've done more is given them a problem to solve. And we'll say, we need X, or I think one of them was around marketing collateral. Leverage AI to create better marketing collateral that can be personalized to the customer that you're engaging with. So equally similar to what you've experienced, I think for the general population, giving a problem to solve, it tends to be to get people going faster than if it's just a blank sheet of paper to react to.
Perfect. I mean, when we consider other roles, it's pretty much easy from an engagement perspective. But when considering tech roles, let's say, for example, some people get hired in tech roles, right? It's important to probably keep their minds ticking because these are creative, hungry folks. And how do you possibly think organizations can do that? Consistently keeping up with their ever increasing needs to learn and their hunger for knowledge. So how do you keep on evolving because of the fact that sometimes it's possible that these roles could get monotonous. But technology is ever evolving, and hungry minds are always looking for more knowledge. So how do you think organizations can keep up with it?
I do think it starts with a leadership commitment to recognize that we have a number of employees and they are motivated to learn and they want to grow, and we therefore need to support that. And I really do think it is a win-win situation, because when you invest in the employees and give them the skills to leverage new tools in better ways, then generally you are going to see better business outcomes if you are very clear on, here's our business priorities and this is what we're trying to do. Then people can very quickly connect the dots in terms of how they can bring their creativity and problem solving to that. And by giving them just better tools and capabilities, then you're just going to see a better return. So I do genuinely believe it's a win-win, but at the same time, you have to be committed to that. You have to invest time in it. It doesn't just happen by itself. So I think this is where you also, have to start with maybe investing in your leaders and making sure your leaders understand the importance of upskilling and learning and development, and how that will ultimately help them be successful, again, in terms of meeting business goals. But that leadership role, and especially maybe at the middle management layer, is really critical to success, to make sure that that permeates down into the organization.
Absolutely. So coming from age-old concepts of paper-driven and resumes to all the way to digital resumes, now hackathons and so many things cropping up into recruitment and identifying talents. I'm pretty sure as a person who's a techie yourself, kind of excited for it. So where do you see this going in the next couple of years, or probably what do you predict would be the next layer in this space in the upcoming years?
That's a great question. And I think certainly it's going to be an interesting one, because as we think about recruitment in particular, right, we've already been very conditioned, rightly so, to think about just that process and how do you remove bias from that process and how do you make sure that you're really getting at the best talent. Which I don't think was a problem we'd solved even before AI came to the forefront. And now that adds a whole other layer, because it's very tempting to leverage some of the technologies that are available. But how do you make sure you're doing that in an ethical and responsible way? So I think that's something we have to be very cautious of as we get into this. But I would also hope that some of these tools now will allow for just a better interview process where people can display their skills as opposed to necessarily just talking about them. And then also, as you've been thinking about it at Skillsoft, it's how do we, really be a partner to the individual as a lifelong learner, and how can we help them maintain their credentials irrespective of which company they're working at, and, have a way to bring those credentials to bear as they are navigating their career, and have some level of confidence in what you're seeing in terms of the skills, the certifications, etc., that they have. So I think there's a lot we can explore that will allow better proof points for individuals in terms of their experience and what they can bring to the table versus maybe what a flat resume would have shown us in the past.
Perfect. And before I let you go, last question. Out of the three, which two you believe would be a perfect fit, or you would probably go with a candidate for? Would it be personality? Would it be skills? Would it be the ability to learn? So if you were to choose any two out of these three, which two would you choose?
I think that was an easy ball question to wrap this up, because I do think it is all about, you hire for potential. And that is right now all about people that have a sense of curiosity, are willing to learn, are willing to fail, and are willing to kind of be on a journey where there's a lot of gray and a lot of ambiguity, but they enjoy that environment and are really just willing to understand what needs to be done and to figure out how they can make an impact and continue to grow in that capacity.
Perfect. Well, I'm so sorry to put an easy question at the end of the day for you, but yeah, it was an interesting conversation. Or I'm not inclined to the space a lot, but I'm learning about it a lot, and that's the reason it's pretty much obvious that I'm very keen on understanding a lot about the recruitment space and the talent space. There's some wonderful insights. I really appreciate you sharing all these wonderful insights with us. It's actually been a real pleasure having you on the HR Tech Edge podcast, Ola. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. And be sure to check out Skillsoft, where Ola and her team are pioneering innovative solutions to empower learning and development through cutting edge technology. Stay tuned with HR Tech Edge for more insights into the world of HR technology. Until next time, this is your host, Sidesh, signing off.